We are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Nolan Huckeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here wherever you may be. And of course, however you may be listening. We are, of course, off of Ohio State's thrashing of Iowa 35-7, I believe it was. And now we're back at it for a game preview of Iowa's first game against one of the new members of the Big 10 from the former Pac-12 in the Washington Huskies. I actually really like this one. I think Washington and Oregon are interesting programs. This should be a fun one. And Washington, while they aren't at the same heights of what they were last year, this is going to be an excellent challenge for both teams. This is one of those games that will decide which of these two teams is more in the middle of the pack and which one is slightly elevated, maybe even approaching the upper echelon of the Big 10. This is going to be a home game for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Again, they are going to be trying to shake the shellacking that they took at the hands of the Ohio State Buckeyes. Before we get into the game preview, I want to say that I am doing this from the perspective of an Iowa Hawkeye fan. Okay. I am not a fan of the Washington Huskies, as I am not a fan of the numerous other opponents that Iowa has played this year. Now, I will provide as much unbiased statistics and facts that I can. And anything that has to do with my own opinion will mostly be at the end in my game prediction and analysis. Although a lot of the stuff that the anecdotes that I add, not antidotes, anecdotes that I add will be regarding the Iowa Hawkeyes, not necessarily the Washington Huskies. So I just got to get that out there as a disclaimer. And so there you have it. Iowa really, this is a massively, massively huge game for them. I believe, especially with the loss to Iowa State, that is looking like not a terrible loss, even though, man, it's like now we're several games into the season and we see where Iowa State is at. It's like we had it. We had it. We would, like, can you imagine where Iowa would be had they been able to secure that freaking victory that they had in hand? I mean, even if they got shellacked by Ohio State, just as they did this past Saturday, it would be night and day. It would be night and day. I mean, the college football playoff would still be in reach. I mean, but shoulda, coulda, woulda. It is what it is. But with that as it may, this is, I think, the turning point game for the Iowa Hawkeyes. I really believe that this will be the game that decides whether Iowa is able to shake off the Ohio State and Iowa State losses as more of an anomaly of what they are as a team for this year and head towards the 9 to 10 win season that many of us, including myself, had as an expectation for this Iowa Hawkeye team, considering how many guys decided to return who could have left and likely been drafted in the NFL. Or they can slide in the opposite direction, and this can, if they lose, spell a more 8 to 7 win type team for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Because in all actuality, Hawk fans, the season actually is looking a little bit more difficult than expected, okay, before the season. And that's why I always tell you guys, when I do my preseason expectations, I never do it based off of how good or not good before the season even starts, I perceive, or the media perceives, the schedule to be, because 9 times out of 10, it is not what people thought it was going to be preseason for any team, because teams on the schedule are better and sometimes worse than what was previously anticipated. You could have a schedule that you think is the most daunting, but several of the team or multiple teams are not anywhere near, for example, like a Florida State. How many teams have Florida State on their schedule? And before the season started, they thought that, that added to the massive strength of opponent rating of their favorite team, only for Florida State to completely fall off the map in one of the worst rebound, or not rebound, follow-up seasons to a top, 8 type season the previous year. So, or you can have a season that seems seemingly easy, and then you have teams like Nebraska that's doing better than a lot of people, including myself, anticipated. Now, there's still a lot of football left to be played, and just because teams have a winning record right now doesn't mean that that's what it's going to be by the end of the year. But still, Illinois is better than a lot of people anticipated. Washington, I think, is meeting, if not exceeding at this point in the year, preseason expectations. You guys get my point. So, nonetheless, I think that this is a make it or break it year, or not year. Well, yes, year. But no, not year, game for the Iowa Hawkeyes. And especially with this being a home contest, this is a must win if Iowa wants to salvage this season in any remnants of what we had hoped for in the preseason. And without further ado, let's dive into these two teams. Now, for what it's worth, I do also think that you could say the same thing for Washington coming into this game as well. I think that if they are able to go into Iowa City and defeat Iowa, this could be a 9-10 win Washington team, when I think the preseason expectations were probably more around the 7 to 8, maybe 6 to 8 range. Before we delve into that, I want to respond to this X post by sports analyst, or maybe not analyst, newscaster, whatever you want to call him, Chris Hassel, who is an Iowa Hawkeye fan. Minnesota. Oh, and here's another perfect example of what I'm talking about. Minnesota. Iowa totally beats them down, makes them, especially in the second half on the road, look like a JV team. And Minnesota just defeated USC, the 11th ranked team in the entire country, and they almost beat Michigan. So again, Iowa's schedule is much more difficult at this juncture in the year than what most people thought it was going to be based on their preseason review of Iowa's schedule. Minnesota almost wins at Big House and then beats number 11 USC. Meanwhile, the team that boat raced them a few weeks ago on their home turf hasn't stayed within 25 of a ranked team for 3 years. Make it make sense. And here was my post. If you're not following me, be sure to head to X and follow me at 247 Hawkeye. Because Iowa's style of football does well against good to below average competition. A conservative, don't beat yourself approach. Bend but don't break. But against elite teams, Iowa doesn't have the BALLS to do what is needed to pull off the win. And I've been saying this for a long time, guys, and hopefully Tim Lester will help change this. And I think Kirk Ferentz used to be this way in the past. But Iowa is, due to their conservative nature and Kirk Ferentz's last 5-year game approach in heavily leaning on LeVar Woods and Phil Parker and Seth Wallace, they are a best of the rest team, meaning their style of football, because they don't have the guts to do what is needed to defeat elite competition, they get boat raced. But when they play good, above average, average to below average teams, they have a really good chance, because Iowa does not beat themselves. And they, on the opposite side, make the other opposing team beat themselves. So you have that, and you have a recipe for a victory. And even with that, Iowa commonly wins ugly. At least the last couple of years, that has been what it is. And so that is how you make sense of that. And I was going to talk about this regardless of Chris Hassel's post. But when I saw that, I'm like, oh, I got to talk about it. Again, my hope, and there's been some positive signs with this, is that Tim Lester will help Iowa get, especially on the offensive side of the ball, get to where they need to get so Kirk Ferentz has the confidence to take more chances, be a little bit, not too much, a little bit less conservative than he is in order to take chances against top tier opponents. Now, I guarantee Kirk Ferentz would say, well, if we didn't have the turnovers that we had in the second half against Ohio State, and if we didn't beat ourselves, then we would not have lost that game as badly as we did. We would have been a lot closer. And yeah, maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe. But I think still Ohio State, based off of some of the other play calls and conservative approach that we saw from Kirk Ferentz, still probably would have won by at least 21 points. Honestly. Really quickly, let's look at the Big 10 games from last week. Michigan State lost to Oregon 31-10. Iowa lost to Ohio State 35-7. Penn State beat UCLA 27-11. UCLA is definitely down in the dumps. Michigan lost to Washington, so Washington will absolutely be riding high into this game. Let's see. I don't know if this game was on the road for Washington. Yes, it was. Or no, it was at home for Washington. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Credits where credit is due. They took care of victory at home, or took care of what they needed to take care of and got the victory at home. But believe you me, and it's not that Washington is not used to playing in hostile environments, because I'm sure they are, but Iowa and traveling halfway across the country it's going to be tough. And I think even Washington fans know that. Let's see. I believe Minnesota won at home against USC 24-17. Yes, they were at home. Good for them. They got that victory. Let's see. Indiana is still undefeated, 6-0, 41-24 victory. Although I don't really think Indiana has played the tough part of their schedule yet. At this point, let's take a look at who they played. FIU, Western Illinois, UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland, Northwestern. Yeah, they've had a relatively, this will be the tough part, is starting next week against Nebraska. The next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I would say 5 games minus maybe Michigan State will determine Indiana's season. Wisconsin smashed Purdue 52-6. Purdue is not having a good year too for their new head coach. And Nebraska won 14-7 against Rutgers. They improved to 5-1. All right, guys, let's take a look at this. ESPN Football Power Index gives Iowa a 60% chance to win this football game, and Washington a 40% chance. And I think actually the 40% chance, meaning if they played 10 times, if Iowa and Washington played 10 times on the road at Iowa, Washington would win 4 times. I think that actually says a lot about Washington and the fact that they are better than most people expected. Looking at their offensive stats, I mean, they have a high-powered offense. Their quarterback has 1,600 yards passing. Let's see, is that Will? Yeah, Will Rogers, 12 touchdowns to 1 interception with a 70.3 QBR. He's probably up there for quarterbacks in the entire country as far as some of the top signal callers and stats in college football. Comparatively, Cade McNamara doesn't even have 1,000 yards passing. and is well below that at 686 with 3 touchdowns and 3 INTs. Let's take a look. He has a QBR of a 34.4. Okay. I mean, that's wow. That is not even close. Edge to Washington flat out. And I've said this, but if you look at Cade McNamara, outside of his game against Illinois State and somewhat his game against Troy, he has been below average this year as a quarterback. Make no mistake. And if Washington comes out of the gate and there is no sign of life for Iowa's offense, I think that this might be the game that we see Brendan Sullivan get inserted into the starting lineup. Rushing yards, Jay Coleman, 601 yards on 90 carries. Let's see how many that is. He's averaging 6.7 yards a carry. Not bad. 5 TDs. Caleb Johnson, 97 carries for 771 yards and 10 tubs. Receiving yards, D. Boston has 492 yards for 8 touchdowns. Jacob Gill, 169 yards, 1 TD. Here are the last 5 for both teams. Washington did lose to Rutgers on the road by a field goal. They did also lose to Washington State earlier this year at home. So they've kind of had an up and down year, but at times, but their strength of schedule is not too bad. I mean, Washington State is a good non-conference game. They took care of business against Northwestern. Rutgers looks like this might be the best year Schiano has had since his return to Rutgers. And of course, they beat Michigan by 10 points. By the way, guys, I feel even worse about our loss to Ohio State, considering Vanderbilt was able to defeat number 1 ranked Alabama the way they did. I mean, that is what is needed in order to defeat an elite program like that. That is how you need to play. And Vanderbilt is nowhere near the football team that Iowa is. And they found a way to beat the number 1 team in the country. So I don't want to hear, and I'm sorry for being triggered and having these flashbacks to the Ohio State game. But there used to be a time where Iowa was known as the team that maybe doesn't have the most talent in the entire country compared to some of these elite teams, but they still find a way due to coaching and whatever the case may be, and the courage to make it close and defeat some of the top teams in the country. That's no longer the case. That is no longer the case. If Vanderbilt can do it, who's not near the team that Iowa is, then I'm tired of hearing Iowa fans say, yeah, it was going to be a loss no matter what. Ohio State's just super good. They have so much talent. Okay, these are Division I athletes out here. Anything can happen. So anyways, the last 5 for Iowa as well. So it looks like Washington probably have they not had their bye week yet? So they also played Weber State. That's one of their victories. Trying to see when their bye week is. It's not this. I think it will be after Iowa. That will be their bye week. So they have 2 tough games coming up. Looks like it's going to be 63 degrees, mostly sunny. And let's see if we have any betting numbers. It doesn't look like we do. Game odds. Here we go. Here we are. Iowa comes into this game as a 2.5 point favorite, with the over and under being 40.5. Not bad. Next, we're going to take a look at the team stats. So Caleb Johnson is still second in the country in rushing, behind Boise State's Ashton Gente. A lot of Ohio State fans were giving me a ton of crap for saying that Caleb Johnson is possibly, I said possibly, the best running back in the entire country. I'm like, guys, I said possibly. I didn't say he was. But in fairness to Caleb Johnson, if I were to make a case for him, he plays in the Big 10, okay? Boise State is not the Big 10. So, the competition is not there. This is total offense. Let's see. Washington has the 21st best total offense in the country. They are averaging 462 yards a game. Iowa definitely will have taken a step back. Iowa State is 51st. For Iowa fans out there wondering, Iowa is now 90th, averaging 363 yards per game of total offense after their abysmal performance against Ohio State. Total defense. Ohio State is 1. Iowa State is 13th. And Iowa took several steps back. They are 25th, averaging giving up 300 yards per game. Let's see. Where is Washington? Washington is 8th. Much better than I expected. Wow. I am stunned. Good for them. This is shaping up to be much more difficult of a contest than I expected. 6th Iowa fans. They are 6th. 256 yards they're giving up. They're better than Iowa's defense. Wow. This is going to be a tough one, guys. This is going to be a tough one. Scoring offense. Let's see. I don't see Washington on the first page. So this is also kind of a surprise. Washington is 92nd in scoring offense, whereas Iowa is tied for 85th. Iowa is averaging 27 points a game, and Washington is only averaging 25 and a half. That is definitely surprising to me based on the individual stats and the total offensive stats that we're seeing. Apparently, it looks like Washington is struggling to capitalize on some of the yard outputs that we're seeing from some of the individuals on their team. Scoring defense, the last one, Iowa is tied for 25th. They're giving up 18 points a game. Again, they slid back due to their game against Ohio State. Washington, of course, is 10th, giving up 13.17, and Ohio State is 1. All right, guys, just to wrap this up, I'm going to give my final analysis of this game. Based on the major statistical categories, and of course, when it comes to Iowa football, they win in the nuance. They win in the margins, okay? So it's not always necessarily the main stats that Iowa wins football games by, but it sure does help. Washington surprised me with their level of defense, but they also surprised me with their lack of scoring output. They are coming off of a really nice victory over Michigan, which shows that they do have the talent to compete in the Big 10, at least initially this year. This is a must-win for both teams. Every game is a must-win, but I really think that this is going to be the defining game for both these teams in the direction that they both take. The winner of this game, I think, will be on the trajectory to be a 9, maybe 10-win team. The loser of this game, I think, will be more in the 6 to 8 range, more near the 8-win range. To me, the edge that I give Iowa is that this is a game that is at home. Iowa is going to need to have a big game from Caleb Johnson, and the defense is going to have to step it up and improve in their pass defense. That has been the one Achilles heel for this Iowa Hawkeye defense. And Phil Parker is going to have to get it figured out, whether it be finding ways to get pressure on the quarterback to make things more difficult and get their head spinning. Because in Iowa's defense, Phil Parker banks on his secondary being able to hold up and stay disciplined in their zone coverage to give their front four enough time to get some pressure on the quarterback. He seldom sends more than the front four. But if you are getting burnt overhead and your defense is not having that eye discipline, then you're going to need to send more and make it more difficult. Either that or Iowa's secondary is going to have to massively improve from last week to this week. I think the fact that this is a home game, I would give Iowa the edge. I do agree with Vegas. I would give Iowa the 2.5, 2-point favorite. In my preseason, I said Iowa would win this game 25-20, and I am going to slightly adjust that. I think Iowa will win this game. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go 27-18. I think Iowa wins this game by 9 points. Um, but I will not be surprised in the least if we see this game be closer than that and closer to the 25-20 prediction that I had in either way. And I also would not be surprised to see Iowa's offense struggle, Washington get out to an early lead, and Iowa turn to Brendan Sullivan. I still believe that Brendan Sullivan is the better option for Iowa. At the very least, I think Brendan Sullivan should be getting at least 10 snaps for the Iowa Hawkeyes per game in order to add some nuance and some wrinkles to the offensive scheme. Because at this point, and I said this in the post game for Iowa versus Ohio State, when you have a quarterback like Cade McNamara, who, albeit is not as slow as like a Nate Stanley or anything like that, or a Spencer Petras, but by and large is unable to escape and avoid sacks, he has to be lethal and at least average at passing the football and moving the football through the air. We have not seen that by and large this season from Cade McNamara. So I really don't see how Brendan Sullivan can be that much worse passing the football to where it wouldn't be worth a look giving him a chance. At the very least, you would get the added upside of his ability to run the football. So again, I guess what I'm saying is, what do you have to lose? What you're seeing from Cade McNamara is if you decided to go to Brendan Sullivan, it really wouldn't be that much of a difference. If you look at the stats, I know Kirk Ferentz wants to say that, he sees that Iowa's offense is progressing and Cade McNamara is okay. But still, based on the stats, you can't really see much of a difference. Okay. Certainly not enough to warrant going with Cade McNamara definitively moving forward. I think Iowa needs to go to Brendan Sullivan in some packages, run pass options at least 10 times a game. And I think that would help Cade McNamara. But again, Kirk Ferentz is totally risk averse, and I doubt that we would see that. So the main thing that I'm banking on, I think Iowa's defense will be much improved from last week against Ohio State. They have not been the defense that I expected this year, but I do think that they will still be solid and be much improved from last week. Again, when Iowa played Minnesota, Minnesota had the better statistical defense, but I knew deep down inside that Iowa had the better defense, and of course they did, which is why they defeated Minnesota so handily. And that's kind of how I see this game as well. The only difference is I think Washington might be a smidge better than Minnesota, and I think and of course, Iowa is not playing Minnesota or Washington on the road like they did Minnesota. They're playing them at home. So that is my prediction for this game. Heavy dose of Caleb Johnson. The kicking game, special teams will have to be solid for Iowa. The defense needs to be improved. I think Iowa is able to escape with a win. But again, this is going to be a tough game. Any Washington fans watching this video, this is going to be a tough one. I'm very nervous about this game, and I really do think that this game will determine the outcome for both teams in their end of the year win-loss record. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to smash the subscribe button, like, comment. You guys know the drill. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow and fox your feelings because your feelings just don't matter. I love you, Hawk fans. I'll see you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.